All right.
Yep.
So on the business side, so we get asked all the time by current clients and folks who maybe aren't clients with us yet to do new technologies. AI is obviously the big one right now, and there's not a lot of specifics around what they're asking of us. They're asking the question, can you help us with AI?
Mm-hmm.
And we've got a lot of questions, which is, what do you want it to do? What are your goals? Do you have any specifics? What technology are you using today that can support AI? And all of those are more business questions. And I think there's a lot of people out there, whether it's FOMO or whatever it is, they know that they need to level up how they do business and make technology a part of that. But before even getting there, the ability to ask themselves these questions, come up with answers, thoughts, ideas, goals, delegate who's responsible and accountable for even looking at new technologies. Those are all it's like a business problem, right? So talk to me in your work life here. You help a lot of people with business problems and putting systems in place that help them think about how they want to do their business better. Talk to me about how you're looking at helping companies solve business problems right now.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think it's really easy to get caught in either the tyranny of the urgent or just the thing that's in the news a lot. And whether it's AI, new technology, a new book, a new management trend, whatever it is, right? We're all kind of wired for that novelty, I think, sometimes. But when I'm working with businesses, I think the first thing I'm trying to ask is what issue are we really trying to solve here? Which is a very simple question to ask, not always an easy one to answer. And in the case that you just talked about, it's probably not. The answer isn't technology. The answer isn't AI. Those are tools, all right? And those are tools that you can use to solve a deeper issue. So getting to them and trying to get to the root of it, right? Is it a people issue that they're trying to solve? Do they consistently have a problem with retention or performance of a sales team, and maybe they're looking at AI as a tool to change that? Or is it a process issue where they've struggled to do something repeatedly and lead to more profitability and scalability in their business, and they're looking at AI as a fix for that? So I don't know if that makes sense, but for me, it's like taking that big step back and getting to the root of the issue before you start jumping to what the solution could be. Because it could be anything from the toolbox. It could be anything from the technology toolbox or another toolbox. So that's typically how I encourage businesses to look at it. It's a little bit of that slow down to speed up. Not always easy to digest, but I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah, I would say that there's definitely the idea that I know that this new technology, because obviously we're in the technology business, so we get a lot of questions that roll around technology. But I know that this new technology, and AI is obviously the biggest one right now, can help me with something. Mm-hmm. I just don't know exactly what that is. Yeah. So it might be right now, let's dip our toe in the water and see if this department or that department or this person can do their job quicker or better or get more results than what they've been able to do on their own without the tool. I think at the end of the day, most companies are trying to find a way to be more profitable.
Sure.
And they're not in a place where they can say, if we supplant a human being with technology, then that'll obviously make us more profitable because this person costs X. Mm-hmm. The technology maybe costs half of X. Mm-hmm. And if they can do the same things, then that's a no-brainer for us. If they don't even know how to implement the technology or any of that type of stuff. Yeah. But I still think, like you said, it starts with what do you want to accomplish? What are you trying to even do?
Sure.
And I don't know if there's enough business owners who understand their core focus, their core values, and those things first. You've been helping us with it. Mm-hmm. We've been going through it for a year and a half, going on 2 years, and we're still, getting to the next level of detail and figuring it out ourselves. Yep. So how do we get more people who are tasked with leading businesses in Buffalo to recognize how important that piece is?
Mm-hmm. It's a great question.
I don't know. I don't know how to do
it. I don't think there is an answer. I think some of it is not everybody's going to think that way, and that's okay, right? There's going to be some business owners that are solely focused on running their business as a lifestyle business, and it might not be worth, and there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever, but it might be, from their perspective, not worth the time to really take a step back and work on these soul-searching questions, like what are our core values? What defines our culture? What's our core focus? What's our sweet spot? Those are easy questions to ask, as I said before, not easy ones to answer. And if your business is broke and you're thinking, it's not broke, I don't want to fix it, why would you dive into that? So I think some of it starts with not trying to convince everybody that you have to do it that way. But for those that are motivated and maybe really open-minded and growth-oriented and feel like they can do more, maybe feel like they're stuck a little bit, or they can do more, whether that's be more profitable or more growth-oriented or hire more employees and impact more people's lives, whatever it means for them. I think it's first identifying those sorts of folks and then working with them in a slow and steady way to get there, whether it's on technology, whether it's on their business operating system, whether it's on anything else that they're doing. So I don't know if I'm answering the question, but for me, it first starts with like making sure that you're talking with like-minded people. And I think that goes for any business. Like, is this potential person on the other side of the table, within your target market? Do they think the same way that you do? Do they value the same things that you do? If they do, there's an opportunity to really, meet in the middle and work on some of these things. If they don't, it's probably not going to work, and you're putting good resources and time and energy after potentially bad, somebody that's not really going to match for you. So think about the work that you guys do. If somebody isn't thinking about, what's our technology strategy and where do we want to go, and therefore then how do we deploy that sort of stuff?
Yeah.
You're probably not going to convert them to that world if they're not thinking, I need to spend time, energy, and money and other resources on figuring out what my technology strategy is.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, we've identified that as one of the, as much as there are like demographic criteria we look for in a business, are they of a certain size, all those types of things. Then there's personality criteria. I think you and I have had that conversation. People who commoditize, if they commoditize, they look at it just like, I have to do this and I wish that I didn't have to, so I want to spend as little money as possible. Or the opposite of that is, I look at this as something that could really help our business. I want to invest in it, all that type of stuff. We look to that. I wonder if Buffalo has been made up of all these small and mid-sized businesses. Mm-hmm. I mean, we do not have a lot of enterprise companies. Mm-hmm. Most of the business community is in the small to mid-sized business space. I would argue that a lot of that, I don't know what percentage it might be, but you mentioned the word like a lifestyle, or the phrase a lifestyle mm-hmm. business. Mm-hmm. I would venture a guess that the majority are lifestyle businesses, or at least a large chunk of them are lifestyle businesses. And there's a lot of them that are transitioning to a next generation of ownership. And I wonder how many are struggling with either the M&A process, mm-hmm. because maybe they're looking to sell this business to somebody outside of the business, or they're struggling with transitioning it to the next generation, or an employee, or a team of employees, or even going ESOP or whatever it is, because they don't have those things in place. Because most lifestyle businesses center around a single personality, or maybe two. And so without those items in place, even if you're not looking to like grow mm-hmm. or like take the business for the next 30, 40 years or whatever, the idea of transitioning it to somebody else, I think, becomes really difficult.
Sure.
When it's all centered around a linchpin personality.
Yeah, that's tough. And I've got some firsthand experience on that, working with a bunch of different companies, as well as a company that I acquired a few years ago. And that's a big transition. It's a psychological transition of, that's your baby. You've built it over decades, probably. It's often centered around you. It's your legacy. You're at the end of your career, and maybe you don't have family to transition it to, and maybe you don't want to sell to private equity who you think might kind of gut the business or take it away from Western New York. Not that that's always the case by any means, but getting over that hurdle of like, how am I going to hand my baby off to somebody else? Or that's a huge challenge. Yeah. So the legacy is and that's kind of what I think you need to solve for when you're working with somebody like that how can they transition their legacy, their products, their services, their brand, the people that work at their company? How can they trust somebody else with that history that they've built? And so a couple of things come to mind. One is, this is where having a way of running your business and running it repeatedly can help remove the fact that it doesn't have to be based on that one or two owners, right? And you can have a leadership team that's running the business. Mm-hmm. Yes, the owner is often on that leadership team, but the leadership team is the one that's making the decisions and setting the course. And so that's also a way to make your business more profitable, by the way. So lots of businesses that are transitioning for exit or a potential exit 2 or 3 years down the road will start to really build up a leadership team, build their processes, make sure they've got more of the right people in the right seats, and make a more scalable, profitable, and better run business that's less dependent upon the owner. That business is going to be worth more money than one that's dependent upon the owner. So that's one thing that comes to mind. The other is just in my experience firsthand of acquiring a local manufacturing company 3 years ago. It was a similar situation to what you're talking about. That being said, I think the owner did a really good job of building a good team of people around him. It was him and his wife. And therefore, the business was running even as the owner was less and less involved in the business. Okay. So that's an example where, although it was still a long process and a long transition to get an agreement between the previous owner and me and my partners, it ended up being much more successful transition. And the organization has grown. The vast majority of the people that were at the organization 3 years ago are still there, and we've added new people. And I think that's because the owner, whether it was conscious or not, did a good job of making sure the business wasn't solely dependent upon them.
Okay.
But I think that's a key part, is like really taking a step back, and the business is bigger than you, right? And you got to run it for the business, and hopefully, yes, you want to make your money along the way, but hopefully you also want to make an impact, right? You want to be employing those people in the community that are paying taxes in the community, that are leading to better things. Yep. And you want to be serving your customers well. Like, I'm a big believer that, business isn't just about making money. It's, you can do well and do good at the same time. And I think there's a lot more businesses that are starting to think that way. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for maybe some of these legacy businesses in a place like Western New York and Buffalo, that maybe new owners can come in and start to run the businesses in that way. And I think that's an exciting opportunity. And, that happens one company at a time. But if, a bunch of those happen over the next, decade, maybe that starts to transition the way that business is done in a place like Western New York. And maybe that starts to have some impacts in the community too, beyond just the business itself.
And I know you and I have talked about this for the last several years, is that concept of we need more. How do we get more people of the next generation either owning or running businesses, or both?
Yeah.
And, I think we've got in this building where we're in Seneca 1 right now, we've got a wonderful organization in 43 North, which is a couple floors down from us. They're really focused on the startup community and trying to get businesses and some of these business ideas to really scale. Mm-hmm. Our community is built of all of these kind of businesses who aren't necessarily looking to scale or grow to infinity or whatever. They're just looking to serve their community in whatever their niche or their role is. I don't know that we've got... I'm trying to think off the top of my head of there's some organizations in Buffalo that are training people. There's Vistage, you and I are both have experience with that. We've got the Center for Entrepreneurial Leadership, right, with UB, and Leadership Buffalo. And there's programs that are out there trying to equip a next generation with skills and some network connections to help them move into a leadership role. But I don't know how we get more...
Yeah.
I'd like to see more of a connected effort to getting next generation leaders into businesses and running these businesses.
Yeah.
I have a feeling there's a lot of companies out there that are trying to sell and they don't have anybody to sell to.
Yeah, I think there is a lot. I think there's increasing more people that are doing the things that we just talked about. That I probably have once a week somebody reach out that's interested in just kind of talking and sharing experiences or trading stories about how to go through this path of acquiring something instead of acquisition. Entrepreneurship through acquisition is like the common phrase that's used, instead of necessarily building a startup. And I think a healthy ecosystem and community needs both of those, right?
Right, correct.
It's not either or, right? And places like 43 North have change the game here in a decade.
Yep.
But maybe the game has changed less on the traditional businesses that aren't often very interesting or selling interesting products. But again, there are businesses that typically have customers already. They have people already. They have IP already, and you can kind of get in there and professionalize and grow those to the next level. So I do think underneath the surface, maybe, and maybe it's more organic, there's more people going down that route. I know there's a lot of people out there searching for these types of businesses. I think something that you touched on 5 minutes ago is that the sellers in those situations probably need a decent amount of partnership to get through the sales process, because they are selling their legacy.
Yes.
And that doesn't happen overnight. And in my case, that was a 2-year process. I'm starting to look at some other acquisitions right now, and it might be a long process again, right? So I think some patience is required. Sometimes in the spirit of making changes, people want to, they declare a direction, they get really excited, and they want to move forward, and then they want to move a mountain tomorrow, and that's not really going to work, right?
Right.
To use a different mountain metaphor, climb the mountain, you don't climb straight up, right? I've never climbed Everest or anything like that, but from what I understand, you go high, and then you got to come back down to reacclimate, and then you go high again. And so I think life is a journey like this. I think acquiring a company is a journey like this. And so maybe it's happening more than we know organically underneath the surface, and maybe a groundswell starts to happen. But I think it's less. It would take less to having organizations that are leading it, because I think it happens, again, just to use that phrase, in a unit of one.
One at a time.
Looking at one at a time,
Yep.
slow and steady, and stacking things, and one at a time doesn't have to mean linear growth. But it's putting one foot in front of one foot in front of the other one each and every day.
Yeah.
Eventually gets you to a better place.
I have major concerns about our community, the business community in Buffalo, and that's made up of we've got the downtown core, and then you get into the kind of greater Buffalo area, you get into the suburbs, and so on and so forth. But the massive amount of change that has taken place over the last 5 years, from the disruption that COVID caused and doing business through COVID to post-COVID, and I would argue that we are now in the next version of whatever the heck time frame that we're in, that we are no longer in post-COVID. Those days are gone. And so now, what is this thing that we're in? The age of AI is obviously a part of that, but it's also this concept of we've got enough at-bats at doing everything digitally for the most part, and that means we're in a global, we are truly now in a global economy, doing global transactions. We've got, people who maybe never used technology before COVID. They know how to scan all their groceries at the grocery store without interacting with a cashier. They know how to buy something off of Amazon and whatever. And we're starting to see the more tangible, the seeable effects of businesses they have to compete now. They didn't have to compete outside of their little area geographically, now having to compete with the Amazons and so on and so forth. And they're going away.
Yeah.
They're not here. And I don't know that we're accepting of all of this. I think it's just we're seeing some stuff happening. We're buying things in a certain way, and we're not recognizing that there's some major effects, probably both negative and positive, that are coming from this. Every time we click the button on Amazon is one thing that we're not buying from our local whatever. The Rite Aid down the street from me is going to be closing in the next whatever. And so those handful of people who used to have jobs there aren't going to have jobs. I'm also not going to be able to have a place that I go and just grab something off the shelf. I've got to order. So what does that all mean? I just wonder if we're going to be able to, as a community that has not been known for being progressive in terms of our use of technology, are we going to be able to adapt enough to keep pace? Or are we going to fall off so much that Buffalo's not going to be what any of us remember it? I don't know. It's kind of an Armageddon
No. It's
type of a thought,
no.
but I'm not hearing enough conversation about this. I'm hearing more about social issues than I am economic ones.
Yeah, which I think is kind of the case everywhere. It's funny you said a place that historically hasn't adopted technology, but if you zoom all the way back, right, it's a place of innovation, right? And
That's right. That's exactly right.
Right. So
yeah, when I say historically, I guess I'm probably talking over the last couple of decades.
Yeah, 30, 40 years. Yeah. So I think this gets to be philosophical. Yeah.
That's a great that you bring that up because I'm doing some work with the Buffalo History Museum right now. That concept, I think, is absolutely brilliant and one that we need to remember as a community of what this place used to be.
Yeah.
Whether it was the late 1800s, early 1900s, all the way through, I'd say the early 50s, 60s, and then it started really changing. Like innovation was at the core of this place, whether it was in, maybe it wasn't digital technologies because those weren't around back then, but in, shipping and logistics and transportation and all these different things.
Product development,
right? All of that was here.
Yeah.
We need to remember who we were, not necessarily reinvent ourselves to become something we've never been.
Sure.
So it's just that you bring that up is a great reminder.
Yeah, and I actually remember early on in 43 North, one of the earlier years, I'd say probably year 2 or 3 or 4, don't quote me on that though, that they had one of their videos that they produced every year that was a callback to a lot of those innovations.
Yeah,
so
I remember.
I think we've done this, and Insight Consulting does a good job of talking about the history and a lot of manufacturing innovations that came out of Western New York. And if you look at some of the economic development strategies, there's been some really good, I think, reimagining of history. So what's happening on the east side of Buffalo with like the Northland Workforce Training Center and Insight Consulting and Buffalo Manufacturing Works, and now there's some startup organizations that are located there. There's some really interesting things. That used to be a place, there's a huge worn down Curtiss Wright factory right by there, and there used to be a huge amount of manufacturing innovation. So I think we're doing a decent job of like honoring our past. I think we can be innovative in the future, and innovation can mean lots of different things to different people. It can be technology and AI. Innovation in the company I acquired 3 years ago was putting the first principles in place and blocking and tackling and having more discipline and focus and accountability. I think sometimes we get, and again, I think a good community, a good ecosystem and region needs all of that. But I think sometimes innovation is interpreted as having to mean something new. And sometimes going back to the basics can be the most impactful and powerful thing. And kind of going back to where you started this, having the base solid and the base right of the organization then allows you to say, ooh, what are we going to do with technology? Or what are we going to do with this other new tool or this new strategy or maybe a new partnership that we're going to embark on or a new sales strategy? But it all comes back to the first principles, the fundamentals that people like Peter Drucker wrote about decades ago, and Patrick Lencioni, and it's the first principles done well and done right, which is that slow down to speed up sort of thing. It's like your any sort of personal health routine you have. If you wake up on January 1st and say that you want to be healthy, you're probably going to have a lot of motivation to go to the gym a bunch and not eat poorly and probably stop drinking. And that's going to last for approximately 11 days until you can't sustain that because you're trying
to get the spike and come January, and then all of a sudden usage drops.
And so it's the same thing with this is the first principles they're all very simple things. They're not easy to do. Simple, but not easy. And I think so often, especially with these legacy companies that we're talking about, but also earlier stage, more entrepreneurial companies, we just get lost in like the growth and the speed and fixing something today. And I think going back to the first principles and doing those things well, how you structure your organization, how you set your priorities, how you use data to inform your decision making along the way. And I mean like basic data, not even like, tech data. How you have your processes set up for scalability, how you run your meetings and make decisions and get to the root of your issues. All those words are like, we know all that, but how many of us are practicing that each and every day and doing that well? I think there's a lot of opportunity to solidify the base, solidify the foundation by having companies work through that sort of thing, which you guys are going through and lots of others are.
Yep.
And from there, you can start to have a solid foundation and tackle your technology strategy and the tools that could come as part of that strategy.
That's the combination of things is the understanding who you are, but then also having the tools to be able to adapt to things that are changing in how people buy or the business climate or whatever. You used to sell to people direct, and now everybody starts buying online. If you don't do that, it's going to be a big problem for you. You used to buy something at X and sell it at Y, but now buying it at X, you've got, whether it's tariffs that are happening right now or other things that have changed the price, like you've got to have the tools to be able to solution your challenges and your issues and that type of stuff. That's been having both of those, the combination of really doing the hard work of understanding who we are, which is not an overnight thing. Like I thought we knew, and we were locked in on core values. I think we did a great job with that. But the other areas of our focus and that type of stuff, we're still, continuing to hammer down on that, so we really understand, have clarity around who we are. But then the tools and building the muscles of, okay, we've used this tool. Let's keep and getting better and better and better at it, so that we're solving our issues quicker, or getting to the root of the issue faster. And those are really helping us face some major challenges right now, which I think all businesses are going through because of technology changes, because of demographic changes, geographical, the setup of geographies where we used to be able to do everything, all of our business locally, and now it's nationally and then even internationally. And the market for our local business, the type of work that we do in one area of our business, has shrunk, which means we've had no other choice if we wanted to keep that alive but to expand geographically. How the heck do we even do that? Like answering those questions, have the tools to be able to ask and answer that question and execute on a strategy.
And even below that, like if you don't have your organization structured to enable that strategy, right? If you built your organization around, somebody who's been here a long time, but maybe isn't in the right seat, well, that you're instantly putting yourself on the back foot. Or if you don't know how to ask yourself, what are those root issues that we got to get to, not just talk about and kind of discuss the symptoms, but go deeper and usually go to that scary place of the deep problem, which is probably a simple problem, but not easy to solve. If
simple,
you don't know,
not easy.
if you don't know how to, set your priorities and stick to them and stay accountable to what you said you were going to do, so it doesn't have to just be technology strategy. You're talking about it in your business alone. The local market for a big part of our work has shrunk, and therefore we have to expand geographically. You identified that, but okay, now how are we going to go do it?
How?
And you're doing that, but you're not going to. It would be harder to do if you didn't have those other fundamental building blocks right first. So I know it's probably a little repetitive, but it's that slow down to speed up. The first principles are the first principles for a reason, because they work, and work on those things. And with that solid foundation, you can do lots of different things, right? You can go in lots of different directions.
Do you think, for those listening at home, what Mike and I are talking about is EOS in terms of a structure and a construct, and there are others, but it's been a big help for us. How do we get? We were talking at the start of the conversation about getting more people connected to ideas, to tools, to other people who are doing these things. I'm really excited for the 43 North Foundation storytelling pillar that they're going to bear down on, because they're going to try to amplify the message of things happening in the business community. You got any thoughts or ideas on how we can get the word out more and connect more people who might be interested in these types of things? I mean, we're trying to do that a little bit with this. Obviously, we're talking about it, having a conversation, making it public, getting it out to an audience. That's one little role that we know that we can play and that we're trying to. But the idea of getting these thoughts, tools, people connections more mainstream than we've had it in the past. What are some of the things, have you given some thought to what are some of the things that can be done?
Not explicitly, but my brain is just kind of popping right now. I mean, I think I'd come back to some of what I said before. I think a lot of it might happen underneath the surface and organically. So
yeah.
You walk away and go to your Vistage group or another network that you're a part of and start to share some of your experiences with whatever tool or system works for you.
Mm-hmm.
I think like it's been 100 years ago and will be 100 years from now, that is always going to be the best source of people hearing a message, because it's not a sales presentation. It's not pitched as this grandiose thing that you've got to do. So I
Nobody's
think,
trying to sell anything.
Yeah, so I think that's like really, really important. I think having storytelling initiatives, which also aren't trying to sell anything, it's trying to raise awareness of some of the good things that are going on currently, maybe some of the good things that happened historically, so we know we've got a decent historical base to build on.
Yeah.
So I think what the 43 North Foundation and other folks are doing there can definitely help. I also think just maybe more tactically, and this might just be my personal preference, it's less about kind of open-ended, networking or narrative sharing, and more about providing value to the business owners today. I'm a big believer in what we call in the EOS world, help first, right? You're always helping before you ask for anything in return.
Yeah.
So, if one, I'm just going to brainstorm with you for a second, if one wanted to bring together a bunch of these business owners that might be doing some of this more organic underneath the surface and say, why don't we have that conversation above the surface a little bit?
Yeah.
Which is, somebody like you would want to do that, right?
Yep.
Okay, let's do that, but let's do that in a way that offers some value today. Give something to them now. So one, they'll show up, they can take it home and apply it into their business tomorrow, and start to build momentum from there, even if it means you get nothing in return in the meantime. So one example is what you're doing here.
Yep.
Right. This is you're giving something. You're not asking for anything here. So I think having that maybe filter on things would help a lot, because a lot of these people that we're talking about, especially maybe those legacy business owners, their heads are down, they're in the business all day, every day. And so it's really hard, even if they should be slowing down to speed up, it's hard to get people to, we all struggle with it in many different personal and professional. So providing value, making sure that somebody can walk away with something, not just like a nugget, but like something they can implement in their business today, I think is a way to garner more of their attention and provide more value. And if you keep doing that, I'm a big believer that stuff comes back in multiples.
And we share that same.
I know
and
it
we've
sounds
done it before,
woo-woo-y, but it works, right?
No, I think we've both gone through that. I think it's just part of our makeup, is this concept of connecting people that we think are good people to connect. Yeah. You met recently with my friend Steve.
Yeah.
You were telling me before. I thought it'd be a great idea for the two of you to connect. I didn't have there wasn't something one was going to sell to the other, or there wasn't any agenda around that outside of you two definitely it'd be worth your time to grab a coffee.
Yeah.
Without any understanding of what would come out of that. And I obviously didn't have anything that I was trying to sell.
Sure.
And you've done that for me.
Sure.
And we've shared ideas with books and all these kinds of things, right? The more we can get of that going on out there organically, I believe in what you believe, which is good things are going to happen from that. We don't know exactly what they are, but good things are going to happen from that. Yeah. And I'm interested in how we can, I know I've talked about with other people about connecting ideas, tools, people, and doing more of that. The more of that happens, I think the better the results end up being, even though they'll be organic and not designed.
Yeah, and there's a combination between those. So again, I'm just live brainstorming here, but one thing that comes to mind is I'm reading this book right now called 10X is Easier Than 2X.
I was going to ask you what books you're reading.
Yeah, Dan Sullivan, who's the founder of Strategic Coach, which is a really great coaching resource for entrepreneurs. And I haven't finished the book yet, but the premise, as I understand it, is that 2X typically is linear thinking. You have a set of constraints, and you're just going to do more within those constraints to get to a better outcome. And 2X, where you are today, whether that's revenue or profit or happiness, whatever, is great. But 10x in the premise of the book is actually easier than 2x because
2x.
so few people are thinking in a 10x way. And this doesn't mean that everything needs to go to the moon, right? It's not about making everything like a high growth venture backed startup. It's just about a mindset shift of like, if you actually set a goal, so like a 10-year target or a big, hairy, audacious goal, a BHAG out there that makes you sweat a little bit and makes you scared, it actually starts to be in your mind a catalyst for what you have to do differently to get there. And then you start doing it differently. Like your brain has now been wired on a future which previously you thought was unobtainable. And so, maybe some of what we're talking about is a mindset shift. And not everybody is going to want that mindset shift. But for those that do, whether they're legacy businesses or obviously kind of the more entrepreneurial, fast-paced startup businesses typically take that mindset. They're on an exponential growth curve inherently. But legacy businesses or people that are looking to acquire legacy businesses or people providing services, like what if there's a group of people, maybe this is Randy's next event, he gets together 50 people that want to like debrief and learn from this book and say, how could we apply that to our world? Now imagine you got 50 people that go back to 50 businesses and all start taking a 10x approach to that.
Yeah.
This is my unit of one thing. Each one has to go away and make their decision as one.
Yeah.
But if 50 people do that, 50 people on exponential growth curves, I can't do the math, but is not 50 times, right? It's millions of times.
Yes.
And so think about over years and decades how that could lead to a different economy and a different outcome. And so although it can be somewhat disparaging when you take a step back and you look at the global trends and you look at a place like Western New York, which has had, although a very rich history, 100 and plus years ago, the past through downturn and steel and an industrial downturn and the Rust Belt, it's had like a risk aversion, and some of that is an artifact that exists today. When you look at that narrative, it can be really discouraging, but if you zoom out, it can be encouraging if you think about where we can go. And I'm just a big believer that the pendulum totally always swings
I agree.
one to the other. And it's like I used to work in financial services, and if you look at your your accounts every day, and if you open your statements every month, it's very volatile. If you look at the long-term history of the S&P 500, it's just going one way. So like it's just what perspective you take, and I choose. I don't always practice this well, but my philosophy, I'd love to choose of not following the micro every day. That's good. Not getting caught in the swings, the volatility. This is why I, for the most part, haven't read the news in 3 years, and
it's great. It's actually a really
just
good
like
thing.
Control what you can. Yeah, totally.
Control
Control what you can control, and work on what you can work. And although I'd love to move mountains, right now I'm focused on like kind of the 3 pockets of my work: this EOS implementation, working with one company at a time, one leadership team at a time. So when I come in and work with you guys, I am 100% like in for you guys for that day, right? So that's a big pocket. I've got my manufacturing company with my partners, which that's our own unit of one, and we're doubled our employment there, and there's opportunities to do more there, and that's really exciting. And a legacy company in Western New York that probably wouldn't end up being here in the long run. So that makes me feel like I'm having an impact. And then work I'm doing with various boards and nonprofits. And I think everyone has to figure out their own portfolio and just like kind of put their head down and work on what they can control. And if everyone does that, well, in the big picture, there'll be a real big impact in the long run.
It's interesting. I think in part because, and I've learned this from some of the work we've done over the last 1.5, 2 years, you've been able to really build the muscles of how do I look at and assemble a construct to run this thing well, get good at the tools to be able to solution your own issues. Mm-hmm. And I think when you do that, it frees up your time to be able to then focus on and do other things. Mm-hmm. And there are so many of us that are overloaded in the day-to-day because we don't have that construct in place. we haven't implemented the tools, we haven't built the muscles from doing all that, and as a result, we are maxed out, and so we're not able to get to some of those other things.
You're not thinking about innovation in the future.
No,
you're behind, let alone in the present, right?
And you need time, and I would say that that applies not just to business, but even in personal life. I mean, I've got 4 kids. You got 2 kids. We're trying to figure this whole thing out there with the kids being at an age where we got to drive them everywhere. We got to pick them up. We got to pay for all this stuff. We got to do all the things. It's springtime, so all the school stuff's happening. I had a chorus thing last night. I got an orchestra thing, chorus thing tonight. All the sports, if they're doing any of those or whatever their activities are. And I think that for most people who are in a certain age demographic, there is a overwhelm from being overloaded. And we're overloaded for good reason, but part of that is also if we had maybe a little bit more structure, if we had some tools to help us frame things, solution some of our issues, we'd probably be able to free up more of our time. You know what I mean?
That's everything.
And that's what I've noticed in us working on some of these. For me personally, it's one of my personal takeaways. It doesn't mean I've done everything well because I've got a lot to be able to work on. But I do feel like I have been able to free up some time. And that time could be focused anywhere. I'm choosing to focus it a little bit on innovation like you talked about, along with some more time being spent on some of the skill building stuff so I can get better serving some of our people. But I'm fascinated because of the period that selfishly I'm at in my own life on what tools, what constructs can I put in place that would give me back time, that would help whatever I'm doing get better, we get a better result, the relationship's better, and then I get some more time back. And I don't think enough of that, I don't think there's enough credit that's given to those that have put in that work, discovered those tools, built those muscles, because that's a huge value.
I think this is a great subject. And I don't think it's just about this stage of life too. I'm sure there's many owners of legacy businesses that are 68 years old and don't have enough time because they're the chief cook and bottle washer.
You got it.
Right? Like,
it applies to everyone.
There will always be a reason, right?
I doubt that there are many people out there, regardless of their age or the point they're at in their life, they go, I've got tons of time in my hand. I would bet that that's a small minority.
It's part of the human condition.
Right,
but
correct.
That doesn't mean it can't be improved, right?
And I would say that's a common denominator for a lot of us too, is if you could get back more time, get better results, and get back more time, I think we'd all take that, whether that's in our business life or personal life or whatever.
So I think everyone wants it, so I think it's universal.
That's good.
I definitely don't think there's an easy answer, right? So to go back to my health thing, right? If there was an easy answer, everyone would do it, right? So paradoxically, if you start working out and eat healthier and get enough sleep, you actually end up with more energy. And so that's not necessarily more time, but like even though you're taking more time in, putting more time into those activities that you might previously not be doing, you end up with more energy on the backside. So it's the same thing with business, I think, is it's a J curve. You got to go down before you go up. You got to go backwards before you go forward. And I think some of that is taking the time in your business to get the structure right. So you have more of the right people that you can delegate things to.
Yes.
This is a delegate and elevate. It's actually Dan Sullivan, that author I mentioned before. This is a term that he coined a while ago. It's just this opportunity of like, what's your unique ability? What's that thing that you get in a total flow state on, that you lose track of time, love doing work in, you get energy from doing that work? Wouldn't it be great if more of us could spend more time there? And we only can if we have the right people that we can delegate some of that other stuff to. So can you go do that tomorrow? No.
Right.
You probably have to change some of those people or coach them up or give them more skills. So that's going to feel like going backwards. That's going to feel like all of a sudden I got to go to the gym 5 days a week.
Yep.
Crap, where am I going to get the time to do that? But if you do that, if you start that march, eventually you'll come out on the other side where you will delegate. You'll let go of those things. Delegate doesn't mean give it to you and I micromanage you. It means you're accountable for that. I'm here if you need help, but you own that. And then when you do that, all of a sudden you do have more time and you can spend more of that time in your unique ability, which, would be connecting and networking and thinking about the future and innovating. And so there's no quick answer. I think it's universal. There's no quick answer. And so it's coming back to those fundamentals, which is, like such a sober, boring message, I think. But I think it's what we have to do. And there's lots of tips and tricks along the way and productivity hacks and all that sort of stuff. But none of that, I think, is a replacement for setting your mindset of like, what's most important to me? How do I surround myself with the people that are going to be great at doing those things? And how do I create extensions of myself and give things away to them? But you got to have the right person in the right seat in order to do that.
And there's a couple of things in there that I think are really important to highlight and for people to understand that maybe haven't gone through this journey before. What you were talking about on those, like the tools, it's not the basics, the blocking and tackling and just being consistent in that, not a sexy thing. Okay. But over time, that will almost always, if you just do the basics really, really well, you're going to get uncommon results usually, which is, I think you talked about on the financial side, the Warren Buffett thing. People think that he's the greatest investor of all time, and he would argue that what he's done is the very common things consistently. He invests in a stock and then he holds it for forever. And the compound interest that is earned is his secret sauce, he's said. It's not that he's some magical
day trading.
Right. Yeah. It's just I'm going to find one that I've got this kind of formula, so to speak, that we think is undervalued. Obviously, he had Charlie Munger, and he's doesn't live in a vacuum, but ones that he thinks is undervalued and he believes in, and they invest in that and they hold on to it for forever, and then they let compound interest do its thing. So the massive amount of wealth that he's gained, from what I understand, after 60 years old, because he's in his mid-90s now, and 30 years of compound interest past 60, on top of all the money that he made on 30 years of compound interest leading up to his 60s, is just, it's a huge number.
And
it's
this is that zoom out. If you look, there's many days he would have looked at that and said, oh, this was a bad investment.
Right, if he would have just been in the moment. But he made the decision at the beginning, we're just holding it for forever. And at least those were his words. I'm paraphrasing, obviously. But the thing that I would say that you didn't mention that you do, and that you've helped us do, that I think is really important, is this idea of issue processing. Because as much as, you talk about, I want to get healthier, so I got to go to the gym and do the health club thing. The trap, I know I've fallen into this in my personal life. I think a lot of people are guilty at doing the same thing, is this idea that I've got the plan. Okay? And I'm going to stick to the plan. The plan only works when something doesn't break. So I'm going to go to the gym 5 days a week, and I'm going to eat super healthy. That works fine when you're not sick. You didn't break a foot. You're not tied up with kids doing stuff. You're not traveling. All these things that life happens to bring your way. And I don't think that in our personal lives we're giving ourselves enough space to process how we're going to deal with some of these issues that come up. We just kind of shoot from the hip, and what happens is that plan, which was a really good one that we came up with, if we could just stick to that sucker, we never figured out how to deal with this, speed bump that would cause some challenges for us to do that plan perfectly. And what happens is, instead of figuring out, here's how I'm going to deal with this in that moment in time, and stick as close as I can to my original plan, and then once that we've gotten over that speed bump, we continue on with the plan. Instead, we just abandon it, the plan, entirely, and we're off to something new.
We're back to the activity.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So that's Mike Tyson quote, right? Everyone's got a great plan until
they get punched in the face.
Right? Mike Tyson. So I think that's right. And that goes back to the simple, not easy. That's really simple to say this is the plan. It's not easy to do it. So I think the root issue identification can be really helpful, whether it's personal or professional. And it doesn't always need to be as methodical as I'm going to make it sound. But like, if you have this plan, you start doing it, you get sick. What's the root issue? The root issue isn't that you got sick. It's that you created a plan that
doesn't work.
Sick. It's not achievable. There's no slack in the system. And I've recently, and kind of right now, I'm going through a little bit of this personally. Like, got this structure and the system in place, and things are working. And 2 months ago, in a week, I had a major change at the company I acquired. I got in a pretty bad car accident. I had a personal relationship thing go on. And it was just like, whoa, there's no slack in the system.
Yes.
So the root wasn't that, I should have drove my car slower to not get in the car accident, which I don't think is why that happened. But it was icy. It was one of those icy mornings in February. It was that I didn't have any slack in the system. I was optimizing things too much, right?
Yeah.
Whatever the plan is, the plan isn't going to get it done for you, right? So just using that as one example, but same thing exists in our business, right? So somebody will come to a leadership team meeting and say, our sales process is broken. And what do? We're off to the races talking about the sales process is broken because Randy said our sales process might be broken, or Jane said our sales. Well, hold on. Before we start talking about our sales process, is that the root issue? And somebody will say, okay, no. If you stop them, like what's the root issue?
Yeah.
Which is the first thing. You got to stop yourself. Call timeout. We're not going to discuss the issue until we get to the root of it. Okay, somebody will say, well, we don't actually really have a sales process. Ooh, that's a different issue. We think we have a sales process. And so they'll start talking about that, like, oh, hold on, again, timeout.
Yeah.
Is that the issue? No, let's go deeper. The issue is that Jane, who owns the sales seat, is a great person. She's been here for 20 years.
Yeah.
We all love her.
We love Jane.
She's not very good at the seat that she's in. If she was, she would have a good sales process and it would be followed. So we're not going to talk about the fact that the sales process is broken or that we don't even have one.
Yeah.
Jane, by the way, you're in the room here. We got to have a conversation. Are you the right person in the right seat?
Yeah.
And that's a hard issue. So simple, not easy, right? Like, so it might be that we've got 47 seats, and so Jane can be in one of the other 47 seats. Or it might be that Jane actually is the right person and everyone else hasn't, been following the process and, whatever. But the point is there's still a hard issue to unpack, but we're on that. We're not wasting our time up talking about the sales process. So whether it's your personal life or your professional life, this concept of root issue identification, which is really just an engineering concept, right? Like you keep digging deeper. It's a very simple concept. It's not easy to practice, but trying it, I would encourage, people to try it because it can help you put your effort and energy, which no one loves, rolling up their sleeves and solving issues. That's not the most fun time you're going to have every day or every week. So if you're going to do it, you might as well attack the root issue. So you're not doing what I call playing business or personal life whack-a-mole, right? Where, the mole comes up and you hit it again and again. And you're like, didn't we hit that mole last week or last quarter or last year?
Yeah.
Yeah, but that wasn't the root issue is underneath, the machine underneath where the moles pop up. We got to disconnect the motor so the moles don't keep popping up, right? So I'm butchering the metaphor here.
Yeah, I get you.
That root issue identification, you're dead on. I think it's a really important skill, and it's one that takes a lot of time to build the muscle. And I've yet to see anyone who does it perfectly or even really good all the time.
Yep.
But it's worth the effort. Like striving for perfection there, knowing you'll never achieve it, but all along you'll achieve some excellence.
Yeah.
That's kind of like growth mindset in a nutshell. And so I think that applies to this root issue identification as well.
We'll do, because we're going to wrap up here. I did want to ask you on that note that I think is important. Those skills, identifying the root issue in business and personal, can be incredibly helpful. You mentioned this idea of building slack in our lives. Again, personal and professional, probably good. There's definitely over the last couple of years, I think all of us have felt the combination of inflation and maybe just changed expectations. It definitely feels like we all need to do more to get the same. If we were over-optimized then, there's nowhere for us to go.
Yep.
And so this concept of, I like the pairing of those two concepts, which is have the tools to be able to identify what the root issue is, build in some time to be able to do some issue processing. Those two things hand in hand, scheduling those for yourself, whether it's in business or maybe even in personal life, could be really helpful at preventing us from all getting to a place where we feel like we have nowhere else to go. All of our time is all being spent. We've got no new ideas or anything like that. We've got no time to be able to think of anything new. What are your I mean, you just kind of went through a piece on that, but building slack. Give me some tactical tips on what you think.
I because I'm, full transparency going through this now, I'm probably the least qualified person.
You may be the most qualified.
I don't know. I'm an industrial engineer by training, right? So
Yeah.
my brain is wired for optimization, which is not a good thing for this, because optimization would say if there's slack, use it. Or if there's slack, keep 5% of it as slack, but then I end up scheduling it still, like doing things I love, but so
real estate has this kind, and I understand it. I didn't understand it until I understood real estate. I had some friends explain it to me. It's this idea that you don't want to base if you own an apartment complex of 100 apartment units, you don't want to base like all your profitability around you being 100% rented, occupied.
Yep.
You want to base it off of a lower number than that, because that's reality.
Yep.
It would be great if it's 100% rented out every time, but I, like you, have always thought of how can I get every second out of the day utilized, because that'll give me my best chance of getting to wherever the heck it is that I want to go.
Yeah.
But without that slack, man, we
got
tough. No room for anything to go wrong.
You have no room, as you said, to think. You don't have room for things to go wrong.
Yeah.
You don't have room for serendipity to happen, for connections, like you connecting me with Steve. And so again, I'm definitely not the best at this, but I'm trying to get better. And like everything else, I don't feel like I have some magic answer. But for me, it's like, and I think it's very individualized. For me, it's meditation and taking time to myself. If I'm not careful, that can become another thing that has to be scheduled, though. So there's a paradox there. For me, it's definitely reading. I read a lot of nonfiction for like work stuff, but also fiction. Like I think reading fiction is, I'd recommend it to anyone. I don't know if it's for everyone, but for me, it's like just a great way to, especially before bed, like shut my mind off and
do the same thing.
Go into a different world and think about something differently. And, shockingly, you start to apply it to your real world problems or situations or challenges. And then for me, it's definitely like family and key personal relationships, right? Like a handful of people that at the end of the day, what are you doing all this for? Like, for me, whether it's business or personal, it's about that. And so, creating some space and some time, not scheduled necessarily, for that stuff to happen, right? Not just to shuffle the kids to the activities, which is a big part of it. Like that's the practical, but like the impromptu, just spending some time with one of your kids one-on-one, or even if it's in my case 2, or in your case all 4 of them, right? But I think that's highly individualized. Other people, I think it's working out is like their Zen time. But despite all of that, I still think I need to, and I think probably the world needs to, just have like a nothing time. I don't spend much time doing that. And that's one of the things I want to get better at, is like some pure nothing time. That's true slack. Otherwise, I'm just going to fill it with the reading and the family time and stuff like that. But time to really unwind and think. We have a concept in EOS that you're familiar with, clarity breaks, like a force function, time that you purposely take away, personal and professional, like the lines blur there. Take out an empty piece of paper and just write. And it's amazing what comes up when you do that. So again, the paradox there is you probably need to schedule that and keep that appointment with yourself sacred in order for it to happen. But if you do that, it's like, so you're scheduling something, which is what we're trying to undo, but you then create space to really start to think and innovate. And that might actually lead you to take more time to make the hard people decisions, so you can create more time. This is this like circular reference paradox thing here, but I think it really works in the long run.
I would say that what I'm learning on that topic is the difference between a machine and something organic. Okay, and so the idea of the engineering background is we want to treat everything like a machine.
Because I definitely have, I have the machine way.
Well, and that's what we all, when we hear about business in particular, we want to try to make it a machine. Government is like this too, because we want a consistent output. And what does a machine do? It produces a consistent output. It's just an equation. This leads to this, which leads to your consistent output. And we want that for our personal and professional goals, right? I want a great relationship with my wife and my kids. I want to make X amount of dollars from my job, which means I might have to do whatever my job is, get certain outputs. And so how can I guarantee all of that? And we we try to apply machine thinking to organic problems, and I think that that's a root issue of some of the things that we run into when we get into our personal lives or our professional lives, and we're involving ourselves, our time, and other people. Those aren't machines. Those are organic human beings or organic situations that we can't control the way we can, some sort of object or ingredient or whatever that we can feed into a construct that then produces a consistent result. And that's the part that I'm, slack is a word that has a few different meanings. One of them, in the context we were using it, is about time. Another one is cutting ourselves a break, and not trying to treat ourselves like machines, because we're just not.
So talk about root issue identification. This is therapy by Randy. No, but I think
this is because I do this on myself all the time.
I know, but I think it's a root issue of many things. Definitely the work I do and the way my brain works. And so, things organically means there's a paradox there again. If you have to have intentionality, organic doesn't mean you just wake up every day and let the wind take you.
Correct.
And that's why this is hard, right? Because our brains tend to think in a binary way. Like, am I just going to wake up and see where it goes? No. So then I'm going to do the opposite, which is schedule it all. And the answer is the calibration is some point there in the middle. And so a lot of my personal work and self-discovery work and exploration work is on figuring out what is that right calibration point. And I know it's, in a little from the extreme machine end of not that I'm a machine, but, I'm more towards that end of the spectrum. And so that's like kind of releasing expectations and setting intentions and seeing what happens. And this is where all the woo-woo stuff comes into, but it works. So, thank you for that. I think it's pretty cool.
Appreciate you, brother.
Okay.
Thanks
Love
for
you,
being
man.
on the
Appreciate
podcast.
it.
Thank you. Love you.
Thank you.